You found it. It's The Real News with your host, David Knight.
Well, it's Thursday, December the 28th, 2017. It was a week ago that President Trump quietly put in an executive order. And I'm kind of kicking myself because somebody sent me a response on Twitter to something that I put out. It was not really a response to it, but they listed this executive order, and they said, what do you make of this? I looked at it and I thought, that's really interesting. Maybe those people that are listed in that executive order have ties to the Clintons. And it turns out that Zero Hedge did an excellent article detailing how these people that are listed in this corruption order, it was a week ago that President Trump put out this executive order and talking about how they're going to freeze and confiscate assets of anybody or any organization that was involved in specific types of corruption and human rights violations. And in this article, it turns out that there are very deep ties to the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation, and others of 6 of these 13 individuals that are listed in this order. And it has further been expanded by others in the government up to, I think it's now 59 individuals. But we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the dramatic running for the exits out of the Clintons' Laureate Educational Foundation. Remember that slush fund that they used as a pay-for-play and a way to get money from massive amounts of money laundered through the Laureate Foundation. This is turning into something that is very interesting. You know, we've seen President Trump kind of sit back and take the hits for a year on this Russian collusion thing. And now they've laid out, I think, a blueprint for really going to the jugular on the Clintons. I'm going to lay out those details for you. Amazing plan if this is really what is happening. And it certainly looks like that is what is going to be happening. We have, as we look at the top 10 media stories of the year, I thought it was kind of interesting. They start out with these stories, and they count backwards from number 10 up to number 1. Well, number 10 was CNN retracts their false Anthony Scaramucci report. Okay, so then the next one was Brian Ross of ABC News is suspended. What do those both have in common? Well, they were caught telling lies about people. Fake news had massive consequences, didn't it? And then the next one that they have, number 8, is Megyn Kelly interviews Alex Jones. Number 8 of the top 10 news stories of the year, according to The Hill. And I thought that was interesting, but they missed the point. They talk about how, well, you know, Megyn Kelly came after Alex Jones for Sandy Hook and so forth. No, this was another case of a fake news blowout. Because there were more people who saw the setup video that Alex Jones put together, where he taped Megyn Kelly says, you know, I know you're coming after me with some kind of a hit piece that's phony. Oh, no. I'm not interested at all in that. I just want to know, do a personal interest story on how InfoWars got so big. And it turns out it was already set up as a hit piece. That blew up in her face, just as certainly as the Brian Ross thing blew up in their face, or the CNN fake news stories. It was another fake news story. And yet The Hill spins it the other way. No, she got caught spinning this and attacking, but she got caught. And that's what these stories mostly have in common. If you look at these top 10 stories, you know, one of them was MSNBC sees rating surges. Okay, so that was kind of a given because anybody who attacks Donald Trump is going to get the people who still can't admit, who won't admit that President Trump won the election. They're going to flock to the people like Stephen Colbert, like MSNBC. That's kind of a given. But the rest of these, the top 10 media stories, really, I think the central theme is the collapse of the manipulative spinning media. And they still don't get it, do they? We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Well, it's Thursday, December the 28th, 2017. You know, we got a lot of things that are happening. I was going to start talking about the terror attack, and I will talk about the terror attack later in the broadcast. I'm going to talk about weather. Everybody likes to use the weather to support their position. So if we have wildfires, which are perfectly normal in California, Governor Brown says this is global warming. we're burning up here. We got to do something about this. Now we've got Arctic weather, and everybody's saying, see, it's no global warming. Well, both of those positions are not really proof of anything. I'm just going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about the Queen of Sheila, Sheila Jackson Lee. Got an update on that story. We got an update on the Roy Moore election. He's now filed a lawsuit demanding a recount, demanding the preservation of records, but the person who certifies that says he's going to ignore that, as they have ignored everything from the very beginning. So we'll talk about that. Also talk about Bitcoin. There is the real story with Bitcoin right now, I think. The plunge that we've seen today has been driven by talk of regulation in South Korea, which is one of the hottest markets in cryptocurrency. But the talk of regulation began over the Christmas holidays. You had all these stories coming out from the Wall Street Journal. Bitcoin is a boon for extremist groups. So conservatives or alt-right or whatever they want to label people are making a lot of money off of this. People like Julian Assange at WikiLeaks made a lot of money off it. We got to shut this thing down. Who is supposed to be regulating this, says the Wall Street Journal? We need some American agency to step in here and start regulating this, says Wall Street Journal. The wrong people are getting all the money. That's what they said. That's the problem. And so now we got South Korea jumping in, and it's taken a dip on the cryptocurrency. We're going to be talking later in the broadcast to Gerald Celente about the economic forecast coming up in the next year, what is going to be happening with that. There's a lot of very interesting news. Of course, we're looking at gold popping up. We've got pot stocks about to soar, get really hot. And California thought the wildfires were something. Wait till you see people starting lighting up with the pot legalization. That may be an opportunity to make more money than you could with cryptocurrencies. So we're going to talk to Gerald Celente later in the broadcast. We're also going to talk to Dr. Sherry Tenpenny about vaccines. But this is the story that we need to focus on today. The executive order from President Trump exactly a week ago. I mentioned this at the top of the broadcast. The fact somebody sent this to me and said, hey, what do you make of this? I mean, nobody talked about this. The first article I've seen on this, Zero Hedge. And I'm kicking myself because I saw this and I thought, oh, that's really suspicious because it was a long executive order, no news about it whatsoever. Quietly released just before the holidays. And it had a list of 13 individuals. And I thought, if they're going to come after these 13 individuals for corruption, and there was a long list of what they were going to do to these people in terms of confiscating their assets and so forth, I thought, there's got to be some Clinton Foundation people in there. I didn't recognize any of the names looking at them. But Zero Hedge did an excellent article putting these relationships together. And I want to go over this with you because I think this is one of the most important things that has happened. We now have most of the mainstream media talking about, is this really, was the FBI really involved in trying to keep President Trump from winning? Was the FBI really involved in trying to remove him from office? And it's like, yeah, we've been talking about this for a year and a half here at InfoWars. It's about time that people caught up to that. But that's now become where the mainstream media is. Certainly the conservative media is looking at that. The Democrats are responding to that saying, you're just trying to discredit Mueller so you can fire him. Well, no, they're discrediting themselves. And the reality is, as we've said so many times, that this is what is really going on here is collusion between Clinton and the Justice Department and the FBI to obstruct evidence of her corruption and to attack President Trump and to remove him from office. That is the real story. The politicization of our law enforcement and our intelligence gathering surveillance state that we now have that is directed not only, our foreign intelligence is no longer foreign, it's domestic. They have turned the eyes of the spies inward on the American people. And that's been evident for quite some time. We look at the Snowden leaks. But as I've pointed out every day, basically, Michael Hayden said we don't look at bad people, we look at interesting people. The people they think are interesting are the ones who could curtail their power or who could expose their crimes. People that they're opposed to politically. And it isn't just that they want global government. These people have committed crimes that they should go to jail for the rest of their lives. That's why they are so adamant about this. And that's why they will double down on this and continue down this road until it is turned around on them and their crimes are exposed. And that's now about to happen. We've got congressmen openly saying they're going to investigate the people at the top of the Department of Justice and the FBI, that it is a corrupt deep state, that they need to be purged. That's what Representative Rooney was saying. That's what people like Matt Gaetz have been saying. Devin Nunes has been saying this. And they're about ready to do something. And you know what? So is Trump. Now let's take a look at what Trump is going to be doing in this next year. I think that this is what this executive order is about. Let's lay this on the line. The story from Zero Hedge, where they went through and they looked at the relationships. And as I said, I saw this thing and it was Christmas holiday, and I thought, I need to look at this. I forgot about it. And it rang a bell when I saw this today in the news. And it's like, man, I should have gone through it, but they did it for us. So let's take a look. Hat tip to Zero Hedge for doing this. As they point out, this was quietly done. It was an executive order that was done last Thursday. And it freezes U.S.-housed assets belonging to foreign individuals or entities deemed to be, quote, serious human rights abusers, along with government officials and executives of foreign corporations, current or former, found to have engaged in corruption. And they define that to be misappropriation of state assets, expropriation of private assets for personal gain, or corruption related to government contracts, or the extraction of natural resources. Extraction of something, corruption related to the extraction of natural resources. What could that be? Would that be something like Uranium One, where they extracted through corrupt processes 20% of our uranium supply for the Russians, covering up corruption in order to do this, which is what the FBI whistleblower has said? Would that be what this is about? We're going to show you the relationship of 6 of these 13 individuals tightly connected to corruption with the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. It goes on to say, anyone in the United States who aids or participates in said corruption, like Bill or Hillary. In fact, anyone in the world who has materially assisted, sponsored, provided financial, material, or technological support for or goods or services to foreigners targeted by this executive order is subject to frozen assets. Okay. Let's understand that the most important thing, we want to see Hillary in jail, Hillary for prison. But we want to also make sure that this Clinton Foundation is eviscerated and shut down. And the way you could do that is with something like this executive order. 13 foreign individuals were put in there as a list of specially designated nationals, several of whom, we're going to go through this, have ties to the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation, or Clinton Associates. Then the Treasury Department added an additional 39 people for a grand total of 52 people in this new order, including the son of Russia's prosecutor general, who has some interesting connections to Natalia Veselnitskaya and all of the stuff where they tried to do a rope-a-dope with President Trump's son. It also has very serious implications for D.C. lobbyists. You want to talk about draining the swamp, draining the Clinton Foundation? One individual who wanted to remain anonymous, an attorney in Washington, said virtually every lobbyist in D.C. has got to be in a cold sweat over the scope of this executive order. But nobody is sweating more than the Podesta Group. We'll point that out when we come back. We're going to get into the details of the plan to defund the swamp and to drain the Clinton Foundation. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. You know, it was 5 days ago. I tweeted out 2016 was the year that Trump beat the uni-party establishment at the ballot box. 2017 was the year that he beat the coup attempt to take him out of office, led by Department of Justice, FBI, CIA officials, and so forth, the deep state, and the press. He beat that. He defended that. He was on defense. And I said, 2018 is when he goes on offense, when he goes after these criminals. Because what they have tried to project on President Trump is what they have committed themselves. And this executive order that came out a week ago, and I'm going to talk about the details of it, is, I think, a glimpse into his attack strategy and the tactic that is going to be very important to come after them. There are very serious implications for D.C. lobbyists in this executive order that says that anybody that is involved in corruption names 13 foreign individuals, 6 of whom have very close ties to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. And it says that they're going to confiscate their assets. And as we were going to break, I said a lot of people in Washington who are lobbyists are very, very concerned about that. It says person means any individual or entity, any U.S. organization which merely employs a foreigner engaged in listed offenses is also subject to frozen assets. It has implications, massive implications for U.S. lobbyists because they're involved in these corrupt foreigners all the time. And also for U.S. corporations. They say, for example, what would happen if, say, Apple employed a foreign national to bribe the People's Republic of China for government approval for selling a product, or if it was Google or Twitter or Facebook, if they were colluding with these people? What would happen if it was, say, a defense contractor like Northrop or Boeing, where they might even have just an employee or a consultant who is not even a U.S. citizen, but a foreign citizen, and they bribe somebody in a foreign country in order to get them to buy airplanes and military equipment? So it has some broad extensions into corruption, but I think it is focused on the Clintons, and we'll tell you why. As the article from Zero Hedge, who put the pieces together on this, if reports from the Hill are accurate, an FBI mole deep within the Russian uranium industry uncovered evidence that, quote, Russian nuclear officials had routed millions of dollars to the U.S. designed to benefit former President Clinton's charitable foundation during the time Secretary Hillary Clinton served on a government body that provided a favorable decision to Moscow, the Uranium One approval. And we've talked about this for a very long time. We've been talking about this for years. We talked about this before the election. We talked about Uranium One. We talked about handing over control of 20% of this to them. But the thing that broke a few months ago was the FBI informant who claims to have video evidence of this corruption, of these kickbacks, of this extortion. And the fact that this FBI informant was gagged by the FBI with a non-disclosure agreement, threatened with prison if he told about the corruption. The FBI was investigating this Russian corruption surrounding this at the time that the uranium cell was being vetted by members of the Obama administration, including Hillary Clinton, including the head of the Treasury Department and so forth, many officials at the Obama administration. They ignored all of this corruption that was being investigated by the FBI. And then they threatened the informant. Don't tell anybody about this after they approved it, after they made a lot of money. And then they talk about the Podesta Group. You know, I said the lobbyists are shaking in their boots about this, especially the Podesta Group. As Zero Hedge points out, a report by Tucker Carlson, a longtime former executive of the Podesta Group, claims that Tony Podesta was, quote, basically part of the Clinton Foundation, and he frequently met with the charity to discuss the Uranium One deal. So here's the situation with this new executive order. If the Uranium One deal is deemed to be corrupt, you think, is there any question about this? Is there any question about the Uranium One deal being corrupt when the FBI gags a witness who, if they had paid the slightest attention to him, of course, they don't know. They don't know that the FBI is investigating corruption, right? They go ahead and approve it anyway. And then when this guy is upset and says, you know, I'm so upset about this, I'm going to tell people about this during 2016, the lead up to the election, because I don't want somebody who is involved in these kind of corrupt practices to become president. They threaten him with prison. So if they were to deem this corrupt under this executive order, and Russian nuclear officials indeed did route millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, and Tony Podesta lobbied on behalf of the deal for the Clinton Foundation, then this executive order a week ago that President Trump put in could freeze the U.S.-housed assets of quite a few of these individuals. Assets can be frozen with no prior warning, a national emergency due to the scope and gravity of the threat posed, says the executive order. When you go after the mafia, how did we get the RICO statutes? And again, I don't like the RICO statutes. I don't like the racketeering, influence, and corruption, corrupt organizations that they did. They looked at it and they said, you know, we can never get a conviction because these mafia dons have so much money. They can hire the best lawyers and they can play all these legal games and tricks. And so what we're going to do is we're going to confiscate their assets before we begin the prosecution. And that way we can get convictions. And they did. But then they wound up using the RICO statute against abortion protesters, against anybody. And then we got civil asset forfeiture, where they just have to imply that the presence of a marijuana butt in your car, that maybe, you loaned it to your teenager and there's some kid in the back that had a marijuana butt there. They confiscate the entire car. They don't charge you with a crime. They don't charge anybody with a crime. They just take the car. And so there's a lot of potential for abuse in this. But I think the strategy that they're looking at here, and understand that Jeff Sessions is a big advocate of civil asset forfeiture. I mean, it works really good if you want to get a conviction against somebody. And if you're going to come after one of the biggest criminal organizations that has ever been there, the strategy and the tactic that you're going to have to use is to take their money first. So I think they look at the Clinton Foundation, as they should, as organized crime. And they're going to have to drain that money before we can get Hillary for president. And so when you look at this, the act points out any foreign person determined by the Secretary of Treasury, any current or former government official, the transfer or the facilitation of the transfer of the proceeds of this corruption, anybody that has been the leader or an official of an entity, including any government entity. I mean, we look at all this stuff, man. I tell you what, this is an outline for coming after the Clinton Foundation. And so let's talk about these individuals that are listed on there and their connections to the Clintons on this executive order 1 week ago that President Trump quietly signed, and there hasn't been any fanfare about it. But let's take a look at these individuals as broken down by Zero Hedge. Again, give them a hat tip for doing this. First one, Gulnara Karimova, 45, daughter of former Uzbekistan leader, headed a powerful organized crime syndicate that leveraged state actors to expropriate businesses, to monopolize markets, to solicit bribes, to administer extortion rackets. Is that their opinion? No. In early 2016, Amsterdam-based telecom giant VimpelCom admitted to a conspiracy in which they paid millions of dollars in bribes to Karimova. The U.S. Justice Department has since sought the forfeiture of $850 million in bribe money from various bank accounts across Europe, and in July, Uzbek officials arrested Karimova for fraud, money laundering, bribery, embezzlement, a variety of other claims. Now, when we come back, I'll give you the connection of this first of 6 individuals to the Clintons. We'll be right back. Stay with us. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. We're talking about this executive order that came out exactly a week ago from President Trump. Executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. We're looking at you, Hillary Clinton, and the Podesta Group, and some other individuals who had connections with him. He's got 13 individuals listed in the appendix of this executive order. He references the Magnitsky Act and so many things. I believe that this is the opening move, laying the foundation for coming after the funds of this massive organized crime family and taking their money, and then coming after these corrupt individuals in law enforcement, in intelligence, in the Department of Justice, in the former Obama administration that assisted them and covered for them. I think this is very important. We're going to talk about who these individuals are. We began talking about the first one of the, there's 13 people listed in this. The Treasury Department extended that list. So it's just under 60 people now. But of the original 13, 6 of them have very close ties to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation, as the article here that we're going through from Zero Hedge points out. Before we finish with this, I want to remind you of some of the sales that we have at InfoWarsStore.com, which funds this operation. This is what allows this program to proceed, and what allowed us to create the programs that we've added to the Alex Jones broadcast in the morning and in the afternoon. And we really do appreciate your support. It's what keeps us independent, keeps us free, and it keeps you healthy. This is a great time to focus on your own health and that of your family. You can pick up, we've extended these 50% off, many of the most popular products we have 50% off and free shipping. We've extended that from Christmas for these end-of-year specials. Let me tell you some of the products that are on sale. We have Myco ZX is now back in stock, and it's 25% off plus free shipping. We also have DNA Force, 33% off plus free shipping, and that is a very big savings on a high-ticket item, just like the ProPure products that are 25% off with free shipping. That's a big savings on water filters and so forth to get free shipping and 25% off. But let me give you some of the products that are 50% off with free shipping. Super Male Vitality, Brain Force Plus, Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine, Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix, all the Super Blue products. That's our fluoride-free toothpaste and mouthwash, 50% off plus free shipping, all these products. Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula, 50% off plus free shipping. And our new products, the Real Red Pill, Cell Force, Alpha Power, all of those, 50% off plus free shipping. Take a look at InfoWarsStore.com. Look at the specials. Take advantage of free shipping here at the end of the year specials. And it helps to keep this program going. It doesn't just help. It's what makes it go, because that's the sole source of our funding. So we really do appreciate your support. All right, let's talk about this first person here. This individual from Uzbekistan, her name is Karimova. She was related to the leader of Uzbekistan, and there's no question about her corruption. And she's listed here. The U.S. Justice Department has been trying to get $850 million from this individual. In July, the Uzbek officials arrested her for fraud, money laundering, bribery, embezzlement, and a variety of other things in 2016. So that was July of 2017. In 2016, one of the companies that had paid bribes to her to operate in that country outed this. But now let's talk about the connection to Hillary Clinton. In 2009, a WikiLeaks cable notes that this corrupt individual who's now in jail, who is known to all these different countries, Karimova, set her sights on Bill Clinton so that she could gain access to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. 3 years later, she co-sponsored a 2012 Clinton Foundation fundraiser in Monaco. Oh, you know, where all the jet setters go. There she is. You can see if you're looking at the broadcast. Hillary Clinton's State Department was asked to weigh in on Bill Clinton's contacts with her. Okay. So that's the connection. You know, there apparently are some connections with this individual. Next individual, Dan Gertler, an Israeli billionaire, a mining magnate. He has been exposed in the Paradise Papers to be chief negotiator between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and his primary business partner, the mining company Glencore, which is founded by Mark Rich. Do you remember that name? Mark Rich. That was a guy that Bill Clinton pardoned on the last day in office. Bill Clinton's last day in office, he pardoned Mark Rich, who had the mining company Glencore that's connected to Dan Gertler. Mark Rich was pardoned for corruption by Bill Clinton on his last day in office after his wife gave $450,000 to the Clinton Library Foundation. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. Now, immediately after this executive order from President Trump, that mining company, Glencore, immediately cut their ties with Dan Gertler, who was one of the 13 named individuals. In 2001, Gertler gave $20 million in cash to the Democratic Republic of the Congo President Kabila. In exchange, his company was granted a monopoly on the diamond trade worth hundreds of millions of dollars a year. See, this is the return on investment these guys get. When you buy favors from the Clintons or you buy favors from corrupt president of the Congo, you only put in $20 million, and then you get hundreds of millions of dollars in return. That's better than investing in Bitcoin. And it's a sure deal, unless you go to jail eventually. In 2012, this president of the Congo, Kabila, offered Bill Clinton $650,000 for a speech in which Clinton sought State Department approval. He said, "Can I do this?" And they said, well, his speaking agency said, "We wouldn't recommend that you appear in photos with this particular dictator." But he did appear in photos with the Uzbekistan woman who is in jail right now, and they're trying to get nearly $1 billion from her. Bill Clinton did have his picture taken with her, but he didn't have his picture taken with the dictator from there. Now, this Israeli billionaire who has the connections to the corrupt dictator in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we put democratic in quotes, his family foundation is also linked to, guess who? John McCain. You know, we talk about the Uniparty. We talk about the Uniparty establishment. And, of course, you got John McCain. What really, they may just leave John McCain alone because of his sickness. But any real investigation of these people should take a look at John McCain and his connections to terrorists and ISIS in Syria. But this guy, Gertler, was on the board of directors of Operation Smile with Cindy McCain for a period of time. The next individual, Jama is his last name. He's a former president of Gambia. He came to power in 94, stepped down in 2017. He has a long history of serious human rights abuses and corruption. Remember, this is about human rights and abuse. That was the point of this executive order from President Trump a week ago. He created a terror and assassination squad called the Junglers that answered directly to him. He was installed as president in 1994 by a CIA-led coup in Gambia that was authorized by the Clinton administration. So he was put in power by Bill Clinton. And in 2014, the Obama administration sidelined an attempted coup. So he's put in power by Obama, and another coup against him was shut down by the Obama administration. So he is a friend to both of those individuals. He's one of the individuals listed here. Another connection to the Clintons. Angel Rijo, Dominican Republic, sanctioned for funneling a $92 million bribe from a Brazilian conglomerate, Odebrecht, to Dominican Republic officials as kickbacks. And this guy donated $50,000 to $100,000 to the Clinton Foundation. Next one, Benjamin Balmel of Sudan. Hillary Clinton pushed for a waiver from the Obama administration. The Obama administration had prohibited military aid to South Sudan because of their use of child soldiers. Hillary Clinton said, let's take that prohibition away. Yeah, they have child soldiers there, but let's take that away. And the last one, Artem Chaika, the son of Russia's prosecutor general. This man curiously met with Natalia Veselnitskaya just before she came to the Trump Tower to try to set up Donald Trump Jr. And they used that meeting as a push to try to investigate the Trump administration. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we may be on the first part of the journey to get Hillary in prison. First part of it is to take away the massive stash of cash that this corrupt organized crime family has squeezed out of people, used to buy the Democrat National Committee, the DNC, according to Donna Brazile. And I've been talking about this executive order a week ago from President Trump, and we finished up with the last of the 6 people that Zero Hedge goes through. The 13 people listed in the appendix, 6 of them have very close ties to the Clintons, a lot of money exchanged, a lot of very corrupt individuals who are giving the Clintons money. I've had Charles Ortell on, and we're going to get him on as soon as possible. He's talked about he says you can pretty much take any corrupt individual, and you'll find a connection to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. Well, they've listed several of them here, and they said they're going to confiscate the money that they have that's in the U.S. and the money of anybody in the U.S. that was connected to them. People like the Clinton Foundation, people like the Podesta Group, and so forth. And this last individual, we'll just go back and cover this a little bit more, and then I want to talk about what's going on with LART education and how the establishment, the liberal establishment, is really turning on Hillary Clinton with this latest video that came out. But let's go back to this last individual, Artem Chaika. He's the son of Russia's prosecutor general, Yuri Chaika. He used his father's connections to win state-owned contracts, and the Russian attorney, Natalia Veselnitskaya, remember she was the one who met in Trump Tower, wanted a meeting, and said, I've got information that you may be interested in or whatever. And they shut it down immediately. But that meeting that was set up by Fusion GPS associate Rob Golston, that was used, many people believe, by the Obama administration to justify wiretapping the Trump campaign. And just before Natalia Veselnitskaya set up this meeting, she met with the Russian prosecutor general, the father of this guy who's now been listed as one of the corrupt individuals that they're looking at. And remember, as we go back with all this, it was about the Magnitsky Act. Magnitsky, Browder, a massive web of corruption in Russia. The Russians arrested Magnitsky. He died in prison. There were charges that he had been tortured by the Russians. The Obama administration enacted sanctions against the Russians on the basis of that. They called that the Magnitsky Act. And then we had Putin respond by stopping U.S. adoptions of Russian children and so forth. And so that all, however, ties together with the wiretapping of the Trump campaign. I believe that this executive order is a tactic that is going to be used, and I believe it is the opening salvo in the offensive campaign of the Trump administration against the corruption in Washington. But let's take a look at something else here. And of course, we've talked a lot about the Laureate education. We've talked a lot about it. But of course, the liberal mainstream media has completely ignored it. Remember how they focused on Trump University, which is a real estate course, and people took it, and they said, well, the gross receipts of Trump University was something like $16 or $17 million. You know, Bill Clinton got $18 million personally from this Laureate University that is operating abroad as a money laundering operation, many people believe, from foreign dignitaries. And so just what Bill Clinton got was more than the gross receipts of Trump University. And now we've had the Robert Zoellick, who was the former president of the World Bank. And again, Robert Zoellick is one of these guys who, like, every time I see his name, it reminds me of the Woody Allen movie Zelig, which is kind of like Forrest Gump, you know, where you got this one guy and he just shows up at all these famous events. And you know, it was a movie that Woody Allen did before Forrest Gump was done. But same type of thing. This guy who's just everywhere. And Robert Zoellick is everywhere, everywhere where there's power. The World Bank and many other connections. Well, he was, he's going to be leaving the Laureate Education Foundation. And they just had their IPO back in February of this year. And it's very interesting because since that time, they have had, just remember, they went with an IPO in February. And so we're talking about the last 9 to 10 months. We've had the company's founder and CEO leave. They had the chief operating officers leave. Chief legal officer leave, the chief human resources officer leave. And the Daily Caller reported on this, and they interviewed somebody who was a professor of finance, is a professor of finance at the Stern School of Business at New York University. He teaches corporate finance and equity valuation. They said, is this unusual? And he says, it's very unusual to see this many people leave so soon after an IPO. He said, right after an IPO, if the top management all departs, that's not good news. It's never a good sign to see all these executives fleeing for the door just a few months after this started. But these people are very powerful. As I point out, Robert Zoellick, former World Bank president. Okay, and before he joined this Laureate University with the Clintons, the World Bank entity called International Finance Corporation awarded a $150 million investment to Laureate. And that was in January of 2013. That was while Zoellick was president of the World Bank. And then after they initially awarded them $150 million, they said, nah, let's just make it $200 million. Just a nice round figure. So they upped it. And then, less than 3 years later, Zoellick joins the board of Laureate for the Clintons. When Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, the guy who was the founder and the CEO, Becker, who also left this last year, got $17 million for another one of his organizations called the International Youth Foundation. And the funds came from the State Department's Agency for International Development. So while Hillary Clinton is Secretary of State, the State Department gives this guy $17 million for an organization that he has. And then she brings him on as the CEO, or he's the CEO and the founder of their organization, Laureate. They collaborated with many Clinton Foundation things. So about 75% of the school's operations are located overseas in about a dozen companies that's been classified or characterized as a classic pay-to-play operation by its critics. We've had 65 members of Congress in July 2016 asked the FBI, the IRS, the FTC, the Federal Trade Center, to probe the Clinton Foundation on corruption charges that included a request to specifically examine Laureate. And now we got all these people running like rats. And so now let's take a look at this piece. What was the organization that did this this video? Do you remember? It was some liberal press organization. The Hive. Okay, The Hive did this. And they're getting a lot of pushback because people who are on the left, big fans of Hillary, don't like them doing this. But they said maybe it's time for Hillary Clinton to take up a new hobby in 2018. Just don't run for president again. You know, maybe she'll learn to make license plates next year. But here's their take on Hillary Clinton.
Cheers to you, Hillary Clinton.
That's from Vanity Fair also. It's a Vanity Fair. 6 New Year's resolutions for Hillary Clinton.
It's time to start working on your sequel to your book, What Happened? What the hell happened?
Get someone on your tech staff to disable autofill on your iPhone so that typing an F doesn't become Form Exploratory Committee for 2020.
You know, on Anderson Cooper, you were telling him about alternate nostril breathing. You seem really adept. You should try teaching a class.
Take more photos in the woods. How else are you going to meet unsuspecting hikers?
Take up a new hobby in the new year. Volunteer work, knitting, improv comedy, literally anything that'll keep you from running again.
To finally put away your James Comey voodoo doll. Now, we all know you think that James Comey cost you the election, and he might have, but so did a handful of other things. It's a year later, and time to move on.
So cheers to you, Hillary Clinton.
Cheers to you, Hillary.
Cheers to you, Hillary Clinton.
Okay, so that was Vanity Fair and Hive telling Hillary, please don't run for president again. Do anything. As I said, maybe she'll be making license plates. You know, that if we were to do that here at InfoWars, I think it would be a little bit more hard-hitting. That was kind of mild, but they are taking a lot of criticism for that. But I think this is going to be the year, and I think we've already had the foundation laid that President Trump is going to go on the offense. He beat him at the ballot box. He beat him with their coup attempt. He beat the deep state, the law enforcement people, the surveillance state, all the mainstream media as they came after him. He's fought that off. And now, I think, with this executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption issued on December the 21st, 2017, that is going to be the RICO Act for the Clinton Foundation. I think that is what this essentially is. All right, we got a lot of stuff that we're going to be talking about when we come back. We'll take a look at some of the headline news that we skipped over because I think this is one of the most important things that has happened in this last week. You know, government is the entertainment branch of the military-industrial complex, as Frank Zappa said. And unfortunately, most of the people in government have been on vacation, so we've had to rely on comedy from the media. But we do have some comments from some of these people, but this is serious stuff. This is the most serious stuff that's happened in this last week. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. You know, we've had several terror attacks in the last 24 hours. We've had a massive terror attack in Afghanistan. And this was launched against a Shiite center. We point out over and over again that Islam is not a monolithic religion. It's like it's at the stage that Christianity was 500 years ago or longer, where you had different groups killing each other, trying to use their connections, their religious connections, to take over the government. The people that founded this country looked at that system in Europe and said, we're not going to have that here. People fled religious persecution that was happening throughout Europe, came to America. That's why the very First Amendment is about free speech, free political speech, and the free exercise of religion. They came to the United States and they established new states, new sovereign states. And most of those states had official religions. And you know, even after the First Amendment was created, you still had, for another 40 or so years, an official state church in Massachusetts. It was a little bit less than that, but it was one of the other New England states. I can't remember at the moment which one it was. Maybe it was Connecticut. Well, I'm just guessing right now. I can't remember. But there were two states. Massachusetts was one of them. Went for about another 40 years after the Bill of Rights with an established state church that you could be required to attend, that you were required to pay taxes to support. So the First Amendment was to make sure that the federal government wasn't going to establish a national religion that would infringe on the religious exercise of within those individual states. In Islam right now, we have the biggies, or the big three divisions, are the Shias, the Sunnis, and the Wahhabists, okay, that are in Saudi Arabia. And they're all coming after each other. They're killing each other. They're killing us. There was a terror attack in Russia. 13 people reported injured in a St. Petersburg blast. 8 are still in the hospital. A total of 13 people were injured yesterday. Explosion in a storage locker at a busy St. Petersburg supermarket in the northeast of Russia. The earlier reported figure of 10 injuries proved to be an underestimate. It was a homemade explosive device that was filled with lethal fragments. But the one that happened in Kabul, Afghanistan, was far more serious. It killed at least 41 people, wounded another 84, many suffering severe burns from the intensity of the explosion. The 3 bombs used in the ferocious assault, there were 3 bombs that were used, as well as a single suicide bomber who blew himself up inside the center where scores of people were gathered to mark the 1979 invasion of Afghanistan by the former Soviet Union. The Islamic State said the center was being funded by Iran and was being used to propagate Shiite beliefs. And so what you see happening here, and one of the people, again, to go back to the bombing itself, is one of the eyewitness reports said survivors were coming out. I saw one boy with cuts to his feet, others with burns all over their faces. About 10 minutes after the first explosion, there was another one outside the street and then another one. So it was a coordinated attack. They had bombs in place, at least 3 of them. They went off in stages, as well as a suicide bomber. But I think it's also interesting to look at the politics of what's going on here. The BBC has an article, The Islamic State in Afghanistan. How successful has the group been? And they point out that it was the first major militant group to directly challenge the Taliban's dominance over the local insurgency. Its first aim was to drive Afghan Taliban fighters out of the area. It also hoped to evict Taliban ally al-Qaeda from the Afghanistan-Pakistan region, or to absorb its fighters. So what we're seeing here is internecine warfare between these different Islamic factions, between ISIS and between al-Qaeda for domination as they blow each other up and as they blow other people up. This is the terror that is continually on the forefront. But of course, we cannot have, must not have, any vetting of the people coming into this country from those countries. Can't have it, say the judges that need to be impeached. I'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight on this Thursday, December the 28th, 2017. We have finally, it's taken a year for the Republican Congress to finally get through a Reciprocity Carry Act. And let me tell you why this is important. We've had multiple cases throughout the years of people who've been entrapped in New York, New Jersey, especially New Jersey, because I remember a couple of cases besides this lady that we're going to talk about here, individuals who had legally gone through the concealed carry permitting process, the training process in other states. And so they were law-abiding citizens who had been very responsible, had followed all the rules to get this privilege that we possess, going above and beyond what they need to do, because we all have the natural right to defend ourselves. That natural right is recognized in the Constitution of the Second Amendment to say you shall not prohibit the keeping and bearing of arms. That means carrying them, okay, carrying them. And this whole thing was really kind of strange how it came through the back door. We have had so many cases throughout our history of the government perverting the purpose of laws, of the Constitution, of our rights, and so forth. You know, we came up with this whole idea of getting permits for concealed carry because it was just a given in society that people would be able to carry firearms and do it openly, and everybody did it. I go back to a Civil War book that I read, and it was a diary of a guy who was a British officer. His name was Colonel Arthur Fremantle, if I remember correctly. He wrote a book called 3 Months in the Southern States, and it was really interesting because this guy came in, entered into, I think he went into Galveston, if I remember correctly. But he went up through Texas. He met Sam Houston. He met all these people. And he, in the middle of the Civil War, with all that bloodshed, he goes up and he just takes this journey up through the southern states. I think he even went into the north and met some of the leaders there. But he could just walk into the camp and going, "Hi, I'm a British officer. I'd like to speak to Robert E. Lee." It's like, sure, he's got a minute. You want to talk to him? I mean, it's like crazy stuff. But of course, you know, our leaders, our officers, even in a time of drastic warfare like we had during the Civil War, did not have the kind of military phalanx protecting them like we do around every government official now, pretty much, of any stripe. I mean, even the director of the EPA has to have 24-hour security around him. But anyway, he went through and he talked to all these people, and it was kind of interesting because he made the comment, he said, I've never seen a society like the South where everybody was armed. And I've never seen such a polite society, which is kind of paraphrased later by Robert Heinlein in The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. And he said, an armed society is a polite society. Well, we used to have a very polite society, and everybody was armed. And it was not an uncommon thing for people to be armed. And they decided that if you had a concealed firearm, and of course, if you watch the Westerns and you got the card shark, you know, Maverick or somebody, you know, and they've got a Derringer up their sleeve and they pull it out, you know, or if they concealed something, they've kind of figured, well, you know, you're concealing your gun, maybe you're up to something. You got some cards you're not showing, you got some firearms you're not showing. So if you're going to have a concealed weapon, making it look like you're not armed, you're going to have a permit for that. And then they took it around and said, all right, you can only carry firearms if they're concealed and if you've got a permit. See how they invert the law here in America? How they have perverted the purpose and the intention of firearm laws? Well, the Northeast is a great place for that. And we've had situations, I remember the case of a guy going through New Jersey. He was moving, and he had his firearms in the trunk of his car, underneath all of his possessions. And he was late to meet his family in New Jersey. He wasn't even moving to New Jersey. He was just passing through New Jersey, part of his move. And his family was very concerned because he was running quite a bit late. And so they called the police, and the police saw him on the road, and they pulled him over, and they started questioning him. Are you okay? Everything all right? Do you mind if we look at your car? Can we inspect your trunk? And he naively said, why, sure. Why, sure, officer. See if you can find any violations. And they did. And they found in his trunk, buried under all of the stuff that he had that he was moving, they found a firearm. And they sent him to jail in New Jersey. And they did the same thing to a mother of two in New Jersey. Her name is Shaneen Allen. She had a permit from Pennsylvania, and she went into New Jersey. And they got her for carrying weapons across state lines. They would have put her in jail for years if she had not been pardoned by Governor Chris Christie. She's nevertheless spent 48 days in jail. And now that this Reciprocity Act, which says if you have gone through all of this, if you have bowed to the state and gotten a privilege license from them for what is your God-given right recognized in the Constitution, if you go the extra mile to these people to play by all of their unconstitutional rules that violate your individual liberty, if you still go to that message and you still take the classes and everything, you go through New Jersey, we're still going to lock you up. And so they said, especially in the wake of this shooting of the congressman, it really lit a fire under the congressman saying, you know what, we have to work in a jurisdiction where they don't allow us, even as congressmen, who have been vetted by the system, who have gone through jumped through all the hoops for these people, had the training and so forth. They don't even allow the congressmen to carry weapons to protect themselves. So they passed this law, reciprocity. And she said, hopefully, and she's a black mother of two, she says, hopefully I will be at the White House next to President Trump signing this bill. That would be great optics, because I want to play this clip for you. A woman who was in Minneapolis, where they have a large Somali population. Here's what happened to her.
Says she could feel the man walking behind her. She turned around to look at him when he charged her. She says they fell on the snow and struggled for several minutes. During that time, he repeatedly plunged a knife into her body. Morgan fought back, and eventually people in the neighborhood rushed to her side.
I wasn't going to let him hurt me. I think as a young woman, you hear stories, you know, of attackers and being weaker. And I was really trying to be brave.
You were going to fight for your life?
Yeah. I don't want to change who I am and be scared. I don't want to be afraid to walk, you know, a few blocks home from work. I don't want to have that fear. So as soon as he's caught it, you know, I'll be so thankful, and I hope that this can never happen to anybody else from him, because it's just horrible.
Evanson says she wants that man who attacked her to know it's not okay to attack people, especially with potentially deadly weapons. Minneapolis police haven't made any arrests. But
okay, let's hold it right there. Here's how you let him know that it's not okay to attack you with a knife. You point a gun in his face and pull the trigger, and then that stops him from attacking other people in an unprovoked manner. We don't know why he attacked her. He just starts stalking her, jumps up behind her and starts stabbing her. A firearm is carried by people like Shaneen Allen, a woman, a small woman who has children. It's carried by people like that because it is an equalizer against a man with a knife. That's why you have it. It's an equalizer for women, especially for women. And as Shaneen Allen said, she said, Republicans put their money where their mouth was on this bill. And yes, it is something. We have a legal right to protect ourselves. And you don't want to be a victim, and you don't want to be afraid. That means that you're going to have to take your defense into your own hands. Learn how to use a gun and get one. That's what Sheriff David Clark told people. He said, look, I'm the sheriff here, but he said, we'll do what we can. We'll come as quickly as we can, but we can't be everywhere. We will try to catch these people, but you are the first responder. He said, get a gun, learn how to use it. You're the first line of defense. You're going to have to defend yourself until somebody gets there. I mean, we just had another issue of a guy who, a guy entered his house and attacked him with a pickaxe. You have to be able to defend yourself. You never know when you're going to have some kind of a crazy idiot. And of course, the other part of the story that they don't talk about there is how in Minneapolis, there is a massive Somali population. And they are so proud of that. They love their Somalis there. They love their Somalis. It's actually called Little Mogadishu by the residents there. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. We're going to be talking to Dr. Sherry Tenpenny about vaccines because, yeah, there is something happening here. There's a man with a gun over there, and he may be threatening us with mandatory vaccines. Or they may have more subtle threats. They may say, we're going to deny you health care. We're going to deny your children education if you don't get these vaccines. And she has been very much at the forefront of talking about how to say no to all vaccines. But we're going to talk to her specifically first about the flu vaccines that are coming up because it's that time of year. Before we get to Dr. Tenpenny, I want to remind you of some of the items that we have on end of the year special at InfoWarsStore.com, including free shipping, massive discounts and free shipping. Here's some of the very popular items, some of our most popular items we put on 50% off discount and free shipping. Here are those items: Super Male Vitality, Brain Force Plus, Survival Shield X2, our nascent iodine, Vitamin Mineral Fusion. That's our vitamin and mineral drink mix, so you can take your vitamins and minerals without having to swallow a lot of pills. That's 50% off with free shipping. All those are 50% off with free shipping. All Super Blue products. That is fluoride-free, but it does have iodine and nano silver to combat bacteria that causes gum disease, that leads to tooth loss, and even to heart disease. I'll tell you what, if you haven't tried our Super Blue toothpaste, you're going to love this. This is a great time to try it. 50% off and free shipping. We know you're going to love that. Also, Secret 12, our vitamin B12 liquid formula, 50% off with free shipping. You don't have to get a B12 injection. And we'll talk about needles here in just a second. You know, people who fear needles, well, if you don't like to get shots, you can get your B12 with Secret 12. We also have our new products, the Real Red Pill, Cell Force, Alpha Power. Those are all 50% off plus free shipping. Take a look at the specials that we have at InfoWarsStore.com. Right now is a great time to stock up, and we really do appreciate your support. That's what keeps us free media and independent. All right, let's talk to Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. Before I do, just as a lead-in to this, there was an article today that came out pushing flu vaccines. I want to get her reaction to this. Here's the title: Fear of needles may chip away at the vaccination rate, says NPR. They say the reasons people may skip vaccines, such as the flu shot, are many. But the key thing, they think, is the fear of needles. I think some people are a little bit more informed than that. I think they fear some other stuff. But they had a woman in Atlanta, in Georgia, Augusta, and she did a study. And she found that teens are more likely to fear needles if they'd received multiple vaccine injections at a single well-child visit when they were 4 to 6 years old. Now, they would do a study like this, but they would never do a study to look at the connection between the skyrocketing autism rates and issues issues. They won't do that kind of study. They'll do a study like, are you afraid of needles? Would that be the reason that you're not getting a vaccine? Why don't you do a study about the origins of autism or whatever? But talking to us about the flu vaccine, because everybody, you can get a flu vaccine shot now at every local drugstore, probably with a fill up of your gas. Everybody's trying to say there must be a huge profit margin on this as heavily as they discount it. But everybody's pushing the flu vaccine. So joining us now is Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. You'll find her at Vaxxter, that's VAXXTER.com. Also at Tenpenny, that's TenpennyIMC.com. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Tenpenny.
Good morning, David. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's that time of year. Everybody is pushing flu vaccines on us. Talk to us a little bit about flu vaccines.
Well, first and foremost, they don't work. You know how this year they're saying that the flu vaccine it only works 10% of the time, but you should get it anyways, right? And so it's really important for people to know. Probably one of the most important pieces of work that I've done on the flu shot for a really long time is that I look back at the CDC data over the last 19 years, and every year they have they collate all this data. So they have 120 testing sites around the country. And if you have flu-like symptoms and you go in with a sore throat and sort of a fever and body aches, they take a nasal swab and a throat swab, and they send it to the CDC to find out if it's actually influenza, which the only thing that the influenza vaccine is supposed to keep you from getting sick is from influenza. So is this illness from influenza or one of about 20 other types of pathogens that can cause you to have the same type of symptoms? So I look back at the annualized collate of all this data that the CDC put together over the last 19 years. And on average, they test, somewhere between 400,000 and 600,000 specimens. And then they say, okay, this percentage are just influenza viruses. And when I did all the data, what it actually shows is that on average, about 15% of the illness that's out there this time of year is actually caused by influenza viruses. So you get an influenza flu shot. It's supposed to keep you from getting sick, but only keep you from getting sick from influenza. And if you get sick from influenza only 15% of the time, that means that year after year, the flu shot fails to keep you from getting sick 85% of the time.
Wow. Wow. And the other part of it is, too, they're trying to guess at we have all these different strains of flu. They're trying to guess in advance which ones are going to vaccinate you with. And these strains that they have, as they have set them aside, they will mutate into other things as well. So that's one of the reasons why it's not that effective, because they don't know what strains you're going to be exposed to. And so it's a shot in the dark, isn't it?
It's no even worse than that, is that they go and they pick 3 strains that were prevalent in Southeast Asia last year, and then they have to find out whether or not those strains actually grow in eggs. And even though they may have been the ones in circulation, if they don't grow well in eggs, they have to match them up with a virus that does grow well with eggs. So they make baby viruses that aren't the ones that match the ones out in circulation anyways. So it's completely a crapshoot. And every vaccine, whether it's a flu shot or hepatitis B or hepatitis A or any of the other vaccines, every single vaccine is an experiment. It's an experiment based on how it's made, the products that it's made from. I mean, flu shots are now there's 2 vaccines that are not made from eggs. One is called Flu Cell Block, and that one is made from dog kidney cells. And there's another one that's called Flu Block that's made from bugs, that they actually grow the viruses in insect cells. And then you get a little bit of insect DNA that gets into the vaccine that gets injected into you. So now you have a choice of disgusting eggs and chicken blood and chicken guts, or dog cells, or insect cells to get injected into you that may keep you from getting sick 15% of the time.
So when you say I've got the bug, that may literally be true. If you get the shot, that's the amazing thing. And of course, as we've talked about over the years, and we've seen many media figures talk about, oh, look, I'm getting my flu shot. You should all do it too. And then they come down sick within a couple of days. You see that over and over again. All right, we got to take a quick break. We're going to be right back with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, talking right now about the flu vaccine and its ineffectiveness. And we'll talk a little bit about the damage potential that you get with that. You know, whatever happened to safe and effective? What if it's not safe and it's not effective? We'll be right back with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. I'm David Knight. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. We've been talking about the flu vaccine, but I want to talk to her also in this segment about her book, Saying No to Vaccines, a resource guide to all ages. And of course, she's written extensively about how to legally say no to all vaccines, because it isn't that they really are that much concerned about your consent. A lot of people who want to force vaccines on you, as I mentioned in the last segment, they will either do it subtly by saying we will not let your kids into school, or maybe they'll get a little bit more forceful about it and say that they will deny you health care once we get to a single-payer system. That is the goal of these people. But I want to finish up on the flu issue, because I think it's very important for people to understand this time of year what Dr. Tenpenny just said. She said only about 10% effective. And the other number that you need to think about when we talk about safety and efficacy, right? Anything that you do in medicine, it should be safe. First rule is to do no harm. And it should also be effective, right? That's how we evaluate whether or not we do a medical procedure. Well, it's only 10% effective. But if we take a look at the vaccine court, where it is very difficult to get any damages awarded. Most people don't even know there is a vaccine court. But the vaccine court does not do any, it's run by the people who are basically, the government runs it. They have given immunity to the vaccine companies, not to you. And they don't do any studies to look at damage from people. So it's very difficult to prove that you were damaged by a vaccine. Nevertheless, the number of people who have received damage awards because of flu vaccine damage has gone up by 1,000% in the last reporting period. So only 10% effective, but an increase in damage awards, even from this rigged system, of 1,000%. Your comments, Dr. Tenpenny.
Well, I'd like to address what the issue is about the word effective. I mean, effective actually, when we talk about it, when you talk about it, or we talk to other people about it, when we think about the word effective, we mean it works. It keeps you from getting sick. But the truth is that the word effective when it comes to vaccines means that I inject you with foreign matter and your body creates an antibody. So it was effective. It did what it was supposed to do. But the real secret is, does that antibody keep you from getting sick? And the answer to that is we really don't know. And all they really care about is whether or not a vaccine induces an antibody. And it says in the medical literature, I've got it reported all over the place in everything that I've written. And the course that I've created, which is Mastering Vaccine Info. And if you go to masteringvaccineinfo.com and put in your email address, we now are closed for enrollment, but we will be opening it up in the spring. And one of the main courses that we talk about in the modules I've created is the myth of vaccine effectiveness, because effectiveness just means you created an antibody. But you can, and I'll give you a good example, David, of how this really works, or what people really need to know, is that you can have 4 or more tetanus shots, and you can have what is supposed to be protective amounts of antibody in your system and still contract full-blown tetanus. So what does that tetanus shot do for you? What does that antibody do to keep you from getting sick, which we would call effective, which it really isn't? And so to me, that's the classic example of injecting foreign matter, whether it's a flu shot or any of the other 16 vaccines that are out there that were given to children, and an additional 7 or 8 that are given to adults. And oh, by the way, there's more than 300 in the developmental pipeline that will primarily be targeted towards adolescents and adults. So effective doesn't mean protection. Effective means you got an antibody, and that antibody doesn't necessarily keep you from getting sick, and in fact might cause you to have autoimmune disease.
Yes, exactly. And we have seen this not only with the tetanus example that you mentioned, we've also seen cases in New York State, for example, where they've had an outbreak of measles, and they found that all except one person had been vaccinated. Patient 0, who started it, had been vaccinated multiple times, and that's why they have you do multiple vaccines, because they recognize that it is not effective. And so they continue to do this. And then they put things like mercury or other things into the vaccine to try to irritate your immune system to try to create antibodies. And then it's those adjuvants that they put in, those irritants that they put in to your immune system that then many people believe are causing things like autism and other responses and damage to your body, to your immune system, to your nervous system down the road.
So I think the takeaway from our discussion right here is that effective is not a synonym for protection.
Yes.
So when you hear the doctors say, or the television commercials say, it's safe and effective, first of all, they've never been really tested for safety. I mean, if you only follow for side effects for 14 days, that's really not looking for how safe the vaccine is. I mean, if it doesn't immediately kill you, that doesn't mean that it's safe. And they'll say safe and effective. Well, I want people to start remembering and programming into their brain when they hear effective, that does not mean protection. That's not the same thing as keeping you from getting sick.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. You know, when I start out talking about this NPR article, fear of needles may chip away at the vaccination rates. And they say, you know, people might skip vaccines, especially at flu time, because maybe they're too busy, maybe they're apathetic, but it's very important that we establish this pattern of people not being afraid to take their vaccines so they can continue to retake them throughout their lives. And I mean, that is a very, very issue right here. So they start studying people's fear of needles, but they won't study a connection between autism and vaccines, which is a plague on our society right now. Why is it that I remember back in the late 90s, a first-person friend of ours, the family, they had a child with autism. I'd never, ever heard of that before. Neither had my wife. It was totally unknown to us. And now it has reached epidemic proportions. Aren't they interested in knowing what's behind this? No, they aren't.
No.
Maybe they do know what's behind it.
Well, you can't find what you're not looking for.
That's right.
So if you're not looking for a cause, you're not going to find it. And it's not only autism, but there's this long list of continual, they call the spectrum, which is asthma, allergies, eczema, ADD, ADHD, insulin-dependent diabetes, a long list of neurological problems. Autism is just the far end of that spectrum of vaccine injury. And it's not only are they not looking for the cause of autism, they won't even fund the study that would actually tell the tale about what vaccines are actually doing or not. They won't fund a study that looks at the health of totally unvaccinated children versus the health of the fully vaccinated kids that have gotten all the doses of all the vaccines by the time they're 5 years of age. They will not fund that study.
You know, when I look at your article here, you know, how to legally say no to all vaccines. And of course, you've written an entire book on this, Saying No to Vaccines, a resource guide to all ages. But one of the things that you said in here was only 2 generations ago, measles, mumps, and chickenpox were normal experiences of childhood. My wife grew up in a family where they had 4 children that were 3 years apart. She was a twin. And a kid down the street got measles, and their mom said, all right, that's it. All of you go down there and play with them for the day because I want to get this all over at once. It was not considered to be a life-threatening experience. You know, you can take anything. You can take the flu or whatever. You can find people who died from the flu. Probably a lot more people died from the flu than died from measles. But nevertheless, you know, the response to something is to say we're going to make the world fireproof if there's a fire out here. But it was a common experience, and we went through it, and we wound up with real immunity to measles as a result of that, unlike the situation that you have with the vaccines where you don't have any real immunity.
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly the point. And, you know, I think a lot of people have seen those videos on YouTube about the Brady Bunch, where vaccines where the measles were basically nothing. And the American Lung Association has actually done a complete evaluation. You know how in the news you used to always hear that 30,000 people a year die from the flu? Well, we actually analyzed that and found the data. It was actually put out by the American Lung Association that shows there are about 700 people per year that die from the flu, not even close to 30,000.
That's right. Yeah. What people think of typically is when you have some unusual strain that comes through, like we did at the end of World War I. That's not typically what is happening. And believe me, these flu vaccines are not going to help you with that. Stay with us. We've got one more segment with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. She's written a book, Saying No to Vaccines, a resource guide to all ages. You know, you've done research, and maybe you have some questions and concerns about this. Maybe you choose, how about that, pro-choice. Maybe you choose not to get a vaccine. But then you find out that, like in California, they're going to put restrictions on your kids, can't get them into school or into childcare. Maybe you work in the military and they're going to be forcing vaccines on you. Or maybe you work in the healthcare industry. I've interviewed a nurse who formed Nurses Against Mandatory Vaccines. We've just recently had a warehouse worker who worked in the healthcare industry. She had no contact with patients. She had no contact with other fellow workers, and yet they were mandating everybody to get vaccines. She refused to do it. They fired her, and she's taking them to court. But give us an idea, Dr. Tenpenny, about what you can do to legally support your choice here as they're trying to coerce people.
That's a really great topic, David, and it's there's a lot that people can do. I mean, first of all, we need to know that all 50 states have medical exemptions. They're difficult to get in most states, but there is a possibility that if you're sick, you can get a medical exemption from your physician. All states except California, Mississippi, and West Virginia have a religious exemption. And there are 18 states which have what's called a philosophical exemption, which means you've looked at the risk of the illness and you've looked at the risk of the vaccine and you say no thank you to the vaccines, and it's pretty simple. But that's only in about 18 states. I'm in Ohio, and fortunately we do have a philosophical exemption here. So healthcare workers are the first target. They're talking about, with Healthy People 2020, coming after everyone who works in the public. Now, unless you're a stay-at-home person and you just have your internet business and you never go outside your house, you work in the public. So that means school teachers, auto mechanics, people that work in restaurants or banks, that they want to make these vaccines mandatory for everyone. The healthcare
everybody in retail, for example, and those people, typically they're not making a lot of money. They don't have a lot of employment choices, and they don't want to risk that job if they've got it.
Right. And there actually was a manufacturer, I think it was an auto manufacturer up in Wisconsin a few months ago, that were trying to force all of their automotive workers, people on the assembly line, to get a flu shot that we've been talking about in the first part of this segment. And the UAW, the union, stood up and said, no way. You know, you are not going to force this shot on our workers. And so that's one of the things that we need to do, is we need to stand up for our rights and know that the separation between you and your government begins at the level of your skin, and that you are not going to force them to medicate you with something that could harm you, even kill you, against your rights or against your wishes. And so healthcare workers can exercise a religious exemption, and they many of them who have illnesses can actually get a medical exemption. But if you can't do that, I would strongly encourage everyone, go ahead and wear the mask. I mean, and the mask, put little whiskers on it, use it as an opportunity to talk. I have nurses that tell me that they write right across their mask, I am not sick, I refused a flu shot. And it gives them an opportunity to speak to their patients about why they chose to refuse a flu shot. So it's educating.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. It's like it solves the requirement, and it also serves as a little protest sign that you've got wearing on your face. That's great.
Moment. An educational moment to tell all the patients who are there wearing why they shouldn't get a flu shot either.
Wow. Wow. So tell us a little bit about some of the other things that you've got going. You've got a seminar that's coming up.
Actually, I'm speaking. There's a couple things. One is at the end of January, I'm speaking at the California Jam in Southern California. It's one of the biggest chiropractic events of the year. There'll be about 3,000 people there. So CaliforniaJam.com or CaliforniaJam.org. I'll be speaking there. I have a course that's ongoing right now. The enrollment is closed, but there is a waiting list, and it's called MasteringVaccineInfo.com. That we go through each one of the individual vaccines. We talk about herd immunity, about how to actually read a package insert. The students that we have right now are loving it. You can see some of the testimonials on the site. So you can put your email in there and get on our waiting list that we're going to reopen for enrollment in the spring. And then saying
that's very important, because most people don't even bother to read the vaccine insert. I mean, it's a very long technical document, just like, when you get an application for your phone and they've got all these things telling about how they're going to spy on you and turn the information over to people don't read those. They just scroll through it and click the button and go on. And they put stuff in their body without reading it as well, because it's laid out in there in the fine print, very long legal document. So it's important to know that there's something you need to read, and as you point out, how to read that.
And it's very important to read the package insert. And on our module on reading the package insert, we actually go through each one of the sections and tell people why it's important and where to look. You know, it's interesting. People will look at the labels on their food and they read every single label. They want it to be organic and non-GMO and read all the labels going to the grocery store, but they don't bother to read what the ingredients are and what's being injected into their body or into the body of their child.
That's a great point. And a lot of that is because of the intimidation of the medical officials and the fact that, you know, hey, they're medical officials and they know better than I do. So I should never question what they're giving me. And I know I've been to doctors like that with my children, and we just said, yes, okay, oh, sure, yeah, go ahead and give me that stuff, that prescription or whatever. They tried to give us fluoride pills or whatever, and we just walked out, and I said to my wife, we're never coming back to this guy again. But you can get very arrogant doctors who dictate that to you, and people are intimidated by that. Don't let them intimidate you.
Yeah, I think this is, and you know, InfoWars and everything that's done through InfoWars does an awful lot to educate people. I mean, that's your whole mode of your business. But I think that one of the things we need to do is to really educate people to take self-responsibility for your health, for the supplements that you use, for the foods that you eat, and question your doctor. You might really be surprised how little your doctor actually knows, especially about vaccines. I would challenge that most physicians haven't even read a package insert. So if you've read the package insert and you go to the section on ingredients and you ask the doctor, do you know the things that are coming through that needle into my body? Do you know what kind of side effects they can cause? Do you know the concentrations of how much aluminum is actually in these vaccines? I would make a small wager that most physicians have no idea, none.
Yeah, because they typically deal with pharmaceutical representatives who come to them and say, hey, look, this has been approved by the FDA. And of course, they give it a pass-fail. You know, they're either totally approved, and that means to their mind that it is totally safe, which isn't the situation. You know, when you look at the commercials that are on mainstream media, and they show you the people, you know, playing in slow motion in the fields with their kites and so forth, as they rattle off all of the serious side effects of this thing, understand that was approved by the FDA. And so that doesn't mean that it's safe. And I just look at that and I just marvel that anybody would take any of these drugs that are advertised like that. But that is the situation that is presented. They give this stuff to the physicians and it's like, hey, it's coming from, it's an approved drug by the FDA, so I can just put it out there. They don't, like you point out, they don't really read the side effects of vaccines or these other things either.
You know what is sort of an interesting and kind of fun little exercise to do is when you're watching sorry about that.
That's right.
when you're watching television and the commercials start to come on. And the commercials start to come on, pick up your phone and start your timer on your phone when they start to talk about the side effects. And what you'll find is in that 60-second commercial slot, that more than half of it is on the side effects. And that should tell you, like, immediately what the issue is here and why you shouldn't be putting that in your body. I mean, everything.
And they're speaking very rapidly. And if you were to do that with the insert in the vaccine, it would be far longer than the 30, 40 seconds of a sped up reader on a commercial. Well, thanks for joining us. And again, the site that I've got here, Vaxxter.com and tenpennyimc.com. And what was the other site where people can get information that you mentioned? MasteringVaccineInfo.com. That's, you can get on our waiting list to open enrollment for our course. And Vaxxter.com is where I write all of my blogs, and we do vaccine news every day. And Tenpenny IMC, that's my clinic here in Cleveland, Ohio. And we've had people from all 50 states and about 18 countries come here and get well and get off of their pharmaceutical drugs. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for the service that you do. And again, it all comes down to education, and it comes down to you having the backbone to stand up for your health, for your family's health. Understand that just as we're talking about medical professionals, we talk about all the time about how people who are in politics, who are in government, don't know and don't care about the Constitution. Well, you need to care about your physical Constitution. You need to understand the possible side effects. There is nothing that is 100% safe. It is always a trade-off. People don't understand that anymore in America, that it is not a binary world that we live in. It is not either totally deadly or totally safe. There is always a percentage of risks, and people don't even understand what those risks are, let alone the fact that there are percentage risks. Stay with us. We'll be back in the next hour. We're going to be talking to Gerald Celente about the economy, about his upcoming forecasts as the Trends Journal forecaster for 2018. Let's talk about how the powers keep on lying. There's a great column from Ann Coulter about Kwanzaa. And, you know, I just talked about Ron Paul having fun with Festivus, which was a joke holiday from a Seinfeld episode where they would put up the Festivus poll, and they would bill it as they would have their airing of grievances, and they would bill it as Festivus for the rest of us. Well, you know, they have Kwanzaa. It's kind of like Festivus. It's a phony holiday, and it's kind of an airing of grievances for the black of us. And this was something that had its origins in the COINTEL programs of the 1960s in the FBI, when they came after the black community. And the way they came after the black community was to create radical, super radical organizations and try to entrap them. And Ann Coulter lays this out along with its phony socialist origins that they're trying to push on the black community. She says Kwanzaa, celebrated exclusively by white liberals, is a fake holiday invented in 1966 by black radical FBI stooge Ron Karenga, also known as Dr. Maulana Karenga, a founder of United Slaves, the violent nationalist rival to the Black Panthers. She says liberals have become so mesmerized by multicultural gibberish that they've forgotten the real history of Kwanzaa and Karenga's United Slaves. She said, in what was ultimately a foolish gamble, during the madness of the 1960s, the FBI encouraged with their COINTEL program, she didn't talk about it as COINTEL, I don't think, but they encouraged the most extreme black nationalist organizations in order to discredit and split the left. The more preposterous the group, she said, the better. Today, she said that same function is being performed by MSNBC and CNN. So this organization, United Slaves, was perfect for them. And when you look at their connection and their celebration of socialism, she points out that Kwanzaa praises collectivism in every possible area of life. And, you know, I have to say that in the black community, this is one of the biggest problems in the black community, is the worship of collectivism, the idea of it takes a village, as Hillary Clinton pushes this. I think that more than anything is why the black community overwhelmingly votes for Democrats, because the Democrats are always pushing collectivism rather than merit or anything else. They're pushing this kind of group think on people, and Kwanzaa is a big part of that. Ann Coulter points out Kwanzaa praises collectivism in every possible area of life, in economics, in work, in personality. And she says it takes a village to raise a police snitch. Again, going back to the FBI's COINTEL program, COINTELPRO, the federal snitches that they were creating. She said when Karenga was asked to distinguish Kawaida, the philosophy underlying Kwanzaa, from classical Marxism, he essentially said that under Kawaida, we also hate whites. So there you go. We've added racism to socialism. I mean, this is what the Democrats are about: hating whites, pushing collectivism, pushing socialism. He says that he took, quote, the best of early Chinese and Cuban socialism. It's based on a very, very narrow origin here, if you can find something good about Chinese and Cuban socialism. And he said that practitioners believe that one's racial identity, quote, determines your life conditions, your life chances, and your self-understanding. Yes, it is Kwanzaa. And this is why I was distressed to see President Trump put out a boilerplate. And again, it was a boilerplate thing. He does this with every holiday. Put out a boilerplate. Happy Kwanzaa to everybody. He had criticized Obama for doing that and for ignoring Christmas. And of course, President Trump said Merry Christmas. But then to say Happy Kwanzaa to people, I mean, we need to understand what is behind these philosophies and who is behind it. The police snitches, the communists, the socialists, the hatred of different races as they push collectivism, and it takes a village. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Gerald Celente is going to be joining us in the next hour. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. Gerald Celente is going to be joining us in the next segment. I'm David Knight, and I want to talk a little bit about economics before Gerald Celente comes on with us with his predictions about 2018. Of course, Gerald Celente doesn't just focus on economics. He looks at the geopolitical situations as well. He's going to have some predictions for us there. But let's take a look at what's going on, for example, in Venezuela. You know, just had a segment at the top of the hour. We're talking about Kwanzaa, how that was put out by the FBI's COINTELPRO. Their co-intelligence program, where they got behind this guy who put out invented a holiday to push collectivism, socialism, and racism in the black community. He says, well, yeah, we take the best elements of classic Chinese and Cuban socialism, and we add the hatred of whites. So there you go. There's your Kwanzaa celebration for you. But as we look at other aspects of socialism, of course, we always have to go back to Venezuela. It's a poster child for socialism right now. I actually think it's even better to go back and take a look at North Korea versus South Korea. If you want to know the difference between economic systems, it's right there, staring you right in the face. You can have abject poverty and tyranny, or you can have one of the most prosperous societies in the world. The people were the same. Their work ethic was the same. They were physically identically the same, and then they were split politically and by economic situations. So take a look at North and South Korea if you want to know whether or not socialism works. Take a look at East and West Germany, or you can also take a look at Venezuela, as people there are scrambling to survive as merchants demand dollars. You know, a very interesting juxtaposition to what we're seeing here in America. Just the idea for the last about 14 months since President Trump got elected, the idea that we were going to have tax cuts, that we're going to have deregulation, has spurred this economy in a way that we haven't seen for probably 2 decades. And now the reality is about to set in. And I want to talk about that, what that's going to mean. But in Venezuela, for example, the guy saying, hey, we can't even think in bolivars anymore, the Venezuelan currency. He said, you have to have a different price every hour. And that's what happens when the central bankers, when the socialists lose control. You know, we've had it's one of the reasons why basically Bitcoin right now is an asset that people would compare to gold rather than a currency, because of the price fluctuations. You have to have some kind of stability. Now, understand that the Federal Reserve has, although they've kind of kept the value of the dollar relatively stable, they have made sure that it's lost more than 99% of its value in the 100 years plus that they have been in. There's been 104 years now that they've had control of the dollar. So they've basically made it worthless, but they took their time doing it. And people like that stability. That's why it is important to have other alternatives like cryptocurrency. But that stability is one of the things that is keeping Bitcoin from being used as a currency as it was designed for. Also, we see that, I think this is interesting as we look at the NFL and the fact that they have doubled down in the face of criticism about their politics. They don't really care about it. We've seen their audiences plunge. We've seen their ratings plunge. And now they're canceling Sunday Night Football for week number 17. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? I canceled it for week number 17. All right, let's talk about the tax cuts. There's an interesting article from WND, 8 reasons why most Americans don't like tax cuts. Number 1, Democrats and the media have persuaded many voters that it's a tax cut only for fat cats. And you're going to see this theme over and over again in these 8 reasons. As I've said before, the opposition to it is basically envy. That is the basis on which Democrats oppose tax cuts. Because as we look at it, some people think the government doesn't have enough money. Some people want government to take care of them. They think that it'll cut government services. They want to have free services at the expense of other people. And they think the way they're going to get that is through the income tax. They're also, the other reasons are that he has it basically boiled down to envy, though. So it's a desire to get stuff from other people, and an envy that somebody somewhere might be getting a bigger tax cut than you are. So he points out some people think that only low Americans will get benefit, so they oppose it. Some people think that only the rich will get the benefits, so they oppose it. Some people think that these tax cuts will only benefit the middle class. So regardless of where you are, the Democrats can exploit that envy. And they can exploit the idea that you want to get by on theft, because that's basically what socialism is. Bernie Sanders is absolutely furious, says The Hill, because the GOP seized on his comments on the tax bill. They said it was a compliment, and he said, that's out of context. Let me make it clear. I would never say that Bernie Sanders supports you having any of your money. He thinks that it is plunder of the U.S. Treasury. He thinks that your money, your time, your labor belong to him. And he's going to dole it out to you like a child on allowance. Or, more specifically, he'll promise you that he's going to give you somebody else's money. That's why people oppose this tax cut. I mean, if it's going to cut your taxes, I can't understand why somebody would not say, hey, I like that. And he had said, instead of this is Bernie Sanders' quote that he said was taken out of context. He said, instead of this grossly obscene piece of legislation, well, we're giving tax cuts to people, we're taking money out of the Treasury. No, it wasn't your money to start with. This is people's money that is not going to be confiscated from them. Let's pass tax reform that permanently benefits all the middle income and working class families without giving tax breaks to the top 1%. Again, the envy, okay? And then he talks about exploding the deficit. Well, he never had a problem while Barack Obama doubled the cumulative debt of all the U.S. presidents previous to him, $10 trillion. He doubled that to $20 trillion in just his 8 years. Did you ever hear Bernie Sanders complain about that? No, he didn't. And they said, then, among other things, we can permanently double the standard deduction, expand the earned income tax credit, reinstate the personal exemption, so forth, okay? To which Ted Cruz said, well, I agree, Bernie. Let's make the middle-class tax cuts permanent. Join me, we'll sponsor legislation. He says, I didn't say that I wanted to cut anybody's taxes, so we'll take it at your word, Bernie. Take it at your word. Meanwhile, Ridley Scott, the director, and he's just done a movie. Remember, it was the movie that was going to star Kevin Spacey as J. Paul Getty. It's called All the Money in the World. It's based on the kidnapping in Italy that happened. I think it was one of J. Paul Getty's grandsons or something. Anyway, that's what the movie is about. It happened in the 1970s. And so as he's making the promotional tour, somebody asked him, they said, there's a lot of commentary in this film about the value of human life, about class struggle, about the role of wealth in society. Do you think there's anything to be learned from this moment in America? Throwing him a softball question. Hit Trump. And what Ridley Scott says, he says, well, let's take this tax bill. And they're like, yeah, double down on the tax bill. Do a Bernie Sanders on it. He says, people say the Republicans are doing it for the wealthy class, but they forget is if you get a clever, unselfish business person, I don't care if it's a corner store or if it's a big business. If they're suddenly saving 15%, they'll put it back into the business, or maybe they'll give their employees raises, or maybe they'll give them bonuses. Maybe they'll pay them $15. Yeah, we've seen that, haven't we? And seeing them say they're going to invest billions to hire more employees. Then you're going to get growth. Then people will get employed. He said, my concern is with the elderly, the infirm, the youth who need to get chances for aid at every shots at every level. He says, but you have to use this. You have to get your head down and use it. Now, I spent the first hour talking about President Trump's executive order of a week ago, talking about how I believe this is the opening salvo to come after the corrupt crime family, the Clintons, just as a RICO statute would defund the mafia before you begin prosecutions of them. But there's something else that's happened here with this tax cut. An article from Zero Hedge, I think, hits it precisely. The spark, the tax cut, is the spark that may burn down the EU. He says, we've seen a lot of stuff. We've seen Trump's election. We've seen within the European Union. We've seen Brexit. We've seen Catalonia. But he said, I think that what is going to push this through are the tax credits from President Trump. He said they're already looking at economic things that are rolling back. And he said it's not just attacking blue state Democrats by taking away the state and local tax deductions, telling people, hey, this is so expensive, you've got to go somewhere else. But it's the repatriation of capital coming back into this country. He said, take Apple. He says if they bring in $282 billion in capital, what is that going to do to the EU? Stay with us. We'll be right back with Gerald Celente. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. We're going to be talking to Gerald Celente in this segment. Before we get to Gerald, I want to remind you of some of the end-of-the-year specials that we have at InfoWarsStore.com. We have some massive discounts as a thank you to those of you who have stood by us in these very difficult years. I mean, we've been at the forefront here, both in this last election and taking a lot of hits this last year. Alex has and as the number 8, I think it was, story in terms of the top 10 media stories of the year. So they've been training their guns on us pretty hard, and we really do appreciate you standing with us. And as part of that, we have discounted most of our most popular products, and most of our products are discounted to some degree of the level, but our most popular products are 50% off with free shipping right now, our end of the year special. Things like Super Male Vitality, Brain Force Plus, Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine, all those 50% off plus free shipping. We also have Vitamin Mineral Fusion, our vitamin and mineral drink mix, so that you don't have to take a lot of pills. That is 50% off. All Super Blue products, that's our fluoride-free toothpaste and mouthwash products. No fluoride, but we do have iodine and nano silver to kill bacteria that create gum disease. It also leads to heart disease. Our Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula, all those 50% off plus free shipping. All InfoWars Life Select products, 50% off plus free shipping. And our newest products, the Real Red Pill, Cell Force, Alpha Power, all of those 50% off plus free shipping. Things like Silver Bullet, 67% off. So some of them are even higher than 50% off plus free shipping. Take a look at the products that we have at InfoWarsStore.com, part of our end of the year special, and we thank you for your support. All right, we're coming up to January. We're just a couple of days from January. And of course, it was named after the mythological god Janus. I don't know if he's Greek or Roman or whatever, but he had 2 faces, supposedly, that one looked forward, the other one looked back. So the guy that we go to is kind of the Janus of InfoWars, the guy who looks forward and back, is Gerald Celente. He is an expert at pointing out trends. As a matter of fact, he publishes Trends Journal. He's not just a trend forecaster, but he's also a publisher, a business consultant, author. You can find that at trendsresearch.com. Thank you for joining us, Gerald. What do you see? Let's look a little bit back at last year, the trends that you saw in 2017, and then let's get a little bit of an idea of what you see as trends coming up in the next year, 2018.
Well, we were we forecast the Trump market rally in 2017, and also the cryptocurrency craze that we see right now. And interestingly enough, we're looking back, but on Real News, we're looking ahead. And anyone listening in, all they have to do is go to the mainstream media, go to every website, the biggest newspapers, the biggest business media, the mainstream media. You know all they're doing? They can only look back.
Yes, right.
These are the stories of 2017. No one wants to look forward.
That's right.
They can't see what's going on. They don't want to know what's going on. They're stuck in the past. So the people that are tuning into Real News are getting not only the past, because that's what trends are. It's an understanding of where we are, how we got here, so we could see where we're going. But nobody else is doing that.
That's right. That's very important. And when we look at, you're talking about the big trends that you'd forecast for 2017 a year ago. You were looking at the stock market rally and other things like that were based on the expectation of tax cuts and of regulation cuts. So are you optimistic now that we're getting the real thing? I mean, people are looking at this. We've got the EU, we've got China out there saying, this is going to be really bad for our economies. I don't know how we're going to compete with this because Trump is taking some of the burden off of the backs of the American people. How are we going to respond to this?
Well, again, there are negatives and positives to this Trump plan as we see it. For example, when you go back to 2004, when Bush had a lot of money repatriated, $300 billion in tax breaks, bringing back, most of it went into stock buybacks. And when you look at what's going on now, it's not like these corporations aren't making any dough. I mean, they're hiding overseas, but they're not putting the money into capital improvements, David. They're putting it into stock buybacks, and that's very important to recognize. I mean, those are facts. And we're concerned about that in the sense that not enough is going down to the rest of us as we look at it. And again, that's the data that's being put out there, whether it's coming from the tax committees within Congress and other groups. So yes, it's going to be a positive. Yes, those are the reasons why the economy is, the markets are growing. But again, there's a disconnect too between markets and what, you know, we the people are living as well. Because when you look at a lot of the data, and it's been going on for quite some time now, you know, median household income is below 1999 levels. What they're freaking out about mostly overseas is that Trump is going to reinstitute reinstitute trade agreements that make sense for us. The ones that we have now are a total ripoff by the multinationals. And the reason that the Americans got their stuff made overseas in China going back to around 2000 and the late 90s was because they had slave labor. It was not so it was. So you can sell it, make the stuff over there, bring it back up here, and mark up the prices. So what he's doing on those fronts with NAFTA, a renegotiation of World Trade Organization agreements, those are what's really going to drive the economy in a solid way, because it will give people jobs that pay living wages rather than giving tax breaks to a guy like Jeff Bezos, who's one of the richest men in the world, worth over $100 billion, to give him a $5 billion tax break so he could build a slave camp that where you got your degree in shipping, handling, and packaging, you make nothing. Yeah. You know, $28,000 a year. So those are the differences. And also, very important, the United States and Europe sold their countries out by going to China, where you can't own the company. You only can own 49% of it. We gave them all our technology, all that we the people paid for. So these little lowlives could make more dough by getting their stuff made there. And now China's taking that technology and they're moving forward with it.
A big part of the China price is not just the currency manipulation, but a big part of the China price, which makes them so competitive and we can't compete with them, is the fact that you point out they steal the technology. People will come over there and say they're going to open up a car facility. The government takes a major stake in the company, and then they start creating a car exactly like the one, for example, that GM is going to create, and they put that car out there in competition with the GM car. So you can't beat they're pirates, basically. We're going to be talking to Gerald Celente. Stay with us. We're going to have some trends for 2018. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Gerald Celente, who publishes Trends Journal. You can find it at trendsresearch.com. Talking about trends coming up for 2018. I want to get your comment on this, Gerald, because there's an interesting article on Zero Hedge saying that the Trump tax cuts may be the spark that burns down the EU, and their rationale on this. I said, yeah, you know, a lot of people have talked about this state and local taxes deduction being taken away from the high tax states in the Northeast and California, where the wealthy are typically the ones who are taking advantage of that, of course. But saying that that was a big knife in the back to Trump's political opponents. But this guy, his name is Tom Luongo, writing this article for Zero Hedge, said it may be the spark that burns down the EU. And his thinking on this is that as they're looking at this stagflation that they've got, or what, you know, they're kind of a stagnant economy, and the idea that as these funds are repatriated, for example, like from Apple, he says, hey, they've got $282 billion. What if they start bringing this money back, even if they put it in the stock purchase buybacks, as you were just pointing out, if it's just for their own, benefit. But if they're pulling back these reserves out of the European central banks and the depositors there and the investments and things like that, they're taking out $5 billion a month. He says, what if they did $5 billion a month out of the European banking system? Is that going to have a huge effect on those banks and on the EU? What do you think?
What the effect is going to be, and this is running counter to what a lot of people are saying, is that if you're pulling out all that money, then what that's going to do is that's going to raise the value of the dollar. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of people are missing right now, because they're saying that the dollar is going to deflate in 2018. But if this money is repatriated, you're selling one currency, you're buying another, basically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's going to drive up the value of the dollar.
And drive down the euro at the same time if they're pulling it back from Europe.
But again, this is where the controversy is right now, because there are two camps out there. There's one camp out there saying that the euro is going to go to $1.30. It's around what, about $1.18, $1.19 now as we're speaking. And so that now, if the dollar gets too strong, that also hurts us on the trade front, because it costs more to buy American. Also drives up the prices, and it costs more to buy commodities because they're priced in dollars. So petrodollars, you buy oil, it's priced in dollars, gold, dollars. So there's a negative and a positive to it. But I, for one, living in a country, would rather have a strong currency than a weak one. And what also does, it undermines and shows really the fraud of what's going on in Europe, where they still have negative interest rates. So they're buying up corporate bonds and government bonds. And this is, by the way, when people say the capitalist system is broken, this isn't capitalism. You never learn about in Economics 101 about negative interest rates and quantitative easing, man. Make this stuff up. So yes, that'll have a negative effect on Europe. The totality of what Trump is doing is better for the economy. On the specifics, again, the people in the middle class, as we review the data, aren't getting as much as we believe they should be getting. And as a guy that lives in New York, and these taxes, by the way, you know, we're paying, people don't realize, we pay ridiculous state, city, and school taxes. They're off the charts. And so we were allowed to deduct those, and now we got to pay double. So that's hurting a lot of people, and it's not only the rich, believe me.
Yeah, but and it's also going to create, as people have looked at this, they said, well, you know, it's going to highlight the fact that those taxes are so high in New York and Chicago and California and stuff. And we've seen a mass exodus of populations from those areas to lower tax areas. So they said, as they're looking at this as a political calculation, that this would increase the electoral college strength of Trump as more people move to these states that typically support Trump. And if they move out of New York or California because they want lower taxes, they'd be more likely to vote for a Republican candidate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and you know, it's just so you just can't pick up and move. You know, I mean, you got a business, you have a life. You know, it's hurting a lot of people, I'm telling you. The taxes are so ridiculously stupid, and there's a good reason for it. That's why I have to defend the good reason. You got a bunch of jerks running the show, a bunch of ignorant morons, and people like to call them their governors, their senators, and assemblymen, and congressmen. It's a freak show in a city and a state near you.
Yes, yes. I would like to see, as you point out, I'd like to see much deeper tax cuts for everybody. And I'm not concerned about rich people getting more money. If they're paying more taxes and you cut everybody by the same amount of percentage, of course they're going to get more money. And so they play that envy game with people. And then they also play this deficit game. These people who never cared about the deficit doubling, the cumulative debt doubling under Obama in 8 years, he added more to the cumulative debt than all the previous presidents combined. And they had nothing to say about it. But then Bernie Sanders and Bob Corker all come out and say, don't cut any more taxes for anybody because we can't take it with a deficit.
Yeah, look, what I'm against this corporate welfare. I'm against both of them at the extremes. But giving these big companies money, like I said, like a guy like Bezos, tax break to open up you're worth $100 billion bucks, and we're giving you a tax break. Yeah, that's what I'm against.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that they're going to take this money like Apple. I think they'll come back in and they'll buy up their stock. I mean, their stock has already taken a hit because of poor iPhone X sales. It took a hit when they announced that these updates they're constantly pushing to you on your older phone will make your phone run slower. So they've had some hits against their stock. They'll pump that into their, take that and reinvest it in their stock, and it'll pump up some more this stock market bubble for at least the beginning of 2018, don't you think?
It will, yeah. Again, we only see the markets coming down about 10% And it's going to be because of an outside influence. That's one of our trends. And what we're most concerned about is what's going on in the Middle East, and particularly with Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States in this fight against Iran. We're very concerned about that because if war breaks out with Iran, it's going to not only bring down the equity markets, it'll crash them around the world. So we're looking for like a black swan event. We don't see the economic fundamentals, even though the markets are overvalued now at levels that are pre-1929 crash and dot-com bubble crash. Because you're going to get more money coming in, that's going to keep pushing them back up.
Yeah, and you're talking about the Middle East. I mean, you're talking about a black swan event. If we have a regional war because of this new crown prince in Saudi Arabia and these other people trying to push a war, if something happens that sends a shock through the energy prices, all people have to do is go back and look at previous times when we've had a shock to the system from energy prices and look at the devastation that it does to the economy. That would be the single most devastating thing to the economy. Whether or not we get involved with a lot of bloodshed, it's going to have a lot of economic consequences for us if there's a Middle Eastern war.
Exactly, and that's one of our top trends for 2018. And by the way, Saudi Arabia's in a recession. They need oil at $100 a barrel for their economy to break even, their balance sheet to break even. And when all else fails, you know, they take you to war. And that's what this guy is doing, as we see it, particularly what's going on in Yemen that doesn't make the news at all. And what's going on with the expansion about what's in Lebanon and then in Syria. Israel is saying that Iran's not going to stay in Syria. We won't let them. You're not going to. What were you to say that?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Let's talk about that more, about what's happening in the Middle East, because the other part of this tax reform bill that just came through, of course, there was the eventual removal of the Obamacare mandate, but there was also ANWR unleashing oil there, which may happen. Who knows what the time frame is going to be? They just required some auctions to open up some of that oil reserves. That would have big economic consequences for Saudi Arabia. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Gerald Celente. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Gerald Celente, looking at trends coming up in 2018. Of course, Gerald is the publisher of Trends Journal. You can find it at trendsresearch.com, a great publication, always very, very insightful. We were just talking, Gerald, about stocks, and you said, look, the equity markets are up to pre-1929 levels, adjusted for inflation, and with the capital that's being repatriated, probably going to be reinvested by these big corporations back into their own stock. They'll probably keep that equity market bubble going a little bit more. When we look at oil, the big question mark, especially for oil, not just for oil, but for the entire economy, is whether or not there's going to be more war there. And just as we're going to break, I said, you know, the other part of this tax cut bill was to open up some drilling, a small part of the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge, what they call ANWR. If that were to be done quickly, that would put even more pressure on the Saudis. As you correctly point out, they're in a tremendous recession because the price of oil is below what they really need to see. Is that going to, you know, we see so often that when the economy is failing, governments like to take people's minds off of that by starting a war. Do you think that increases the likelihood of war in the Middle East?
Well, it's definitely going to keep the. It's too much oil and not. It's more oversupply, supply and demand issue. Period. Sure. Paragraph. And America, by 2020, will be producing more oil and gas than the biggest producer in the world, which is Russia. So opening up even more is going to put even more downward pressure on oil prices. And again, the Saudis are very desperate in what they're doing. Oh, and they're pumping the crown prince. I told you how he became a crown prince.
Go ahead, tell us. Yeah, did he kiss a frog, or
the princess kissed the frog?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. We talked about that last time.
This stuff up. These guys in 1932, this gang was creeping. Prince, you know, save it. Yeah, the crown prince. Don't forget the bow. Anyway, they're saying, you know, he's getting rid of corruption. This is the guy that bought that Da Vinci piece for almost $500 million.
That's right. And it was a Christ painting or something like that, you know, going to a Muslim. When things get tough, he goes shopping, doesn't he?
and he just bought a Louis XIV chateau for $400 million, and he bought a $500 million yacht. So he's really doing a great thing about getting rid of corruption.
Yeah.
But
how's that for irony? He doesn't understand the meaning of irony, does he?
You know, again, when I talk about politicians before, here's a definition. This is out of Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and anybody can Google these up. So when people fight and they say, I like that politician, that's my kind of politician. Well, here's a politician. A person who acts in a manipulative and devious way, typically to gain advancement within an organization. A person primarily interested in political office for selfish or other narrow, usually short-sighted reasons. Don't forget the And
that's why people used to say, don't call me a politician, call me a statesman. But you don't hear anybody being called a statesman anymore for that very reason. They're all politicians, right?
They're all politicians. So that's another one of our big trends for 2018. We call it blockchain democracy.
There you go. Yeah.
So everybody knows about the blockchain. This thing, you can't knock through it. You make a deal, it's sealed. But transaction's sealed. Now, why can't we vote online? It's better than the corrupt systems that we have now. What a jerky, stupid system. You got to go wait online to vote. We could vote on our computers. So let's talk about the Trump tax plan. Why can't we vote on it?
Yeah,
Why can't we vote if you want to go to war in Syria or Somalia? No, don't give me this stuff that these people are smarter than me, because if you believe the definition of a politician, I don't think so.
Yeah,
and are we?
Right.
So
well, you know, for the people who have, Gerald, for the people who have concern about direct democracy, I would point out that the original First Amendment that they didn't go with addressed having a limit to the number of people that could be represented by a politician. And we've seen in places like New Hampshire that when they have like in New Hampshire, a small population state, they have something like, it's over 400 people in their state house. And if a few years ago, if you spent more than $1,000 to get elected to the state house, you were accused of buying the election. So it really brought the representative democracy closer to the people. We could do that with blockchain technology like you're talking about. We could have 6,000 representatives. So we went with the original, what the original intent of the founders was, to have no more than 50,000 people represented by a congressman. It would be something like 6,000 congressmen. That would really democratize the Congress, wouldn't it?
Yes, we'll tell our politicians how to vote. Hey, you know what they forgot? You know, they roll out the red carpet. They're always saluting these people all over the world. They forgot two words: public servant.
That's right. That's right.
With blockchain democracy, there's no reason why we can't vote on major issues and tell the people that are and that's the other politicians. These guys never worked a day in their lives. They've been sucking off the public, you know what, forever. And by the way, I was the assistant to the secretary of the New York State Senate at 23 years old. I was there firsthand, you know, bam, right at the top. And I saw how grown men grovel to suck their way up to the top. They'll sell out their mother because a politician is a person who acts in a manipulative and devious way, typically to gain advancement within an organization.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I've had people who were pages in the North Carolina legislature saw this guy who had been there for years. He was like Jabba the Hutt, they call him. His name was Liston Ramsey. And basically people would just line up and kiss his ring like a mafia don. I mean, that was what was going on there.
Yeah. So direct democracy, as you said, why not? This system isn't working. It's only enriching the rich. And by the way, it's another one of our trends. Follow the yellow Silk Road. China's buying up the world. Their new Silk Road is their Belt and Road Initiative. They're going to be connecting Eurasia, Asia, parts of Africa, Europe, they're investing trillions into this. The business of China is business. The business of America has become war.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Whether you like the Chinese or not the issue. The difference that I'm making here, we're pointing out China's an inside-out government. The central government runs the show. Everybody's on board. If you're not on board, you're out of here. In the United States, it's run from the outside. We have all these special interests paying off all of these little lowlifes called politicians that are primarily interested in political office or for selfish or other narrow, usually short-sighted reasons. So we don't have a government that's pushing the economy forward for the benefit of all of us. We got a bunch of jerks like little Bernie Sanders, who never worked a day in his life, and I'm going to give you free education. All of these people, John Insane McCain, Lindsey, did you come out of the closet yet? Graham, Nancy out of her mind, Pelosi, Eddie Munster Ryan. What's going on over here? What I'm saying is they're making the decisions that are destroying the nation because they're getting paid off. That's the end of the story. So China, follow the Yellow Silk Road, because as these politicians are destroying our future here and not what's doing best for us, but doing best to fulfill their own little egos, China's doing it to build their economy bigger. Here's a number. When China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, 2 weeks after 9/11, when no one was paying attention, 5% of their population was middle class. Today, 35%.
Interesting. Yeah. And they're running this like these guys they're the inside leadership of the Chinese government, even though they're communist, even though they're authoritarian. They're running this. They see themselves as like the board of directors of this giant corporation. And even though the people in China are still very poor, they're seeing this increase. And that is where their power base lies, and people who are happy with seeing at least an increase in their standard of living. Thank you so much for joining us, Gerald Celente. You can find Trends Journal at trendsresearch.com. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Gerald, and wish you a happy new year and hope that we can talk many times in the coming year. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. And that concludes our broadcast. Thanks for watching.
In ancient times, man roamed the earth in a constant state of hunting or being hunted. Introducing Caveman, where cutting-edge science meets ancient super nutrients. Secure your bottle right now at InfoWarsStore.com.